Hey guys, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. My name is Kristen. Each week I search out the true stories that sometimes are mysterious, sometimes a little bit squeamish or scary, but they always end on a good note because the point to these stories is they always have at least one miracle. So if you like true stories and unexplained and good happy endings, listen along and we will get started today. So our story begins with a woman named Jeannette, and she was putting her 9-year-old son, Micah, on an airplane, and he was going from Maine to California for a whole summer to go visit his father, Tom. Well, Jeannette, she was a nervous wreck, being scared, about sending her child off. She was just, like any mother would be. And of course, that day came when she's putting him on the plane. She's crying and saying her goodbyes and that she would see him in a couple months. But in the back of her mind, what she was really worried about was her old ex-husband, Tom, because for years, Tom had actually abused her for 9 years, to be exact, the whole life of Micah, unfortunately. Now, he had never put a hand on Micah. He had never harmed him, but he had been very abusive to Jeannette. So, of course, she's going to worry like any mother would, even though he had never done anything to Micah per se. Now, a little brief backstory about Tom and Jeannette's relationship. So for that 9 years before they separated, like I said, he abused her, and he'd always make threats to Jeannette. He'd tell her, "You take Micah and you leave, or you leave me, I promise you, I will get custody of Micah and you'll never see him again." I mean, he would do these kinds of things to Jeannette all the time. And so she was scared. She lived in fear, their whole relationship. And, after 9 years came and went, she couldn't take anymore. She was like, "That's it. I can't. I'm done." And so she filed for divorce, and the court awarded Jeannette full custody of Micah. Shortly thereafter, Tom started to give her phone threats, all kinds of threats. And he actually took her back to court 5 times, to try to get full custody of their son and take Micah away, just like he said he would. But thank goodness that never happened. The court was smart about that and left Micah in Jeannette's hands. Now, eventually, Jeannette met a man. He was a pastor named Ken. They remarried and they moved off to Maine because they were all living at California at this time. That's where they were all from. And so he was going to go pastor a church, and that's why they flew across the country. And of course, she had custody of Micah, so she took him as well. But despite her being remarried and moving, the harassment from Tom didn't stop. I mean, this guy, bad news, right? I guess he had nothing else better to do. He's just one of those, typical abusive types. All right, so now back to present day. It had only been about 24 hours since Jeannette put Micah on that plane to go be with his father for the summer. Well, she gets a call from Tom's lawyer in California, and that lawyer tells her that he had seen photos and that their son Micah had been severely beaten. He had bruises and cuts and scrapes from head to toe. Tom, of course, had taken those pics, and he was actually accusing Ken, Jeannette's new husband, that he said Ken did all this to Micah before Micah had got on that plane to go to California. Now, right off the bat, Jeannette didn't know right at first that Tom was accusing Ken of doing this. So all these questions went through her mind like, who did this? Who would do this to a child? Oh my gosh, did my child get jumped or beaten on the plane or right before he boarded the plane when I left? Or did Tom actually do this? Question after question. I mean, she's a nervous wreck even more so now. Well, of course, Ken, he is livid. I mean, I would be too if somebody was accusing me of these things. I mean, luckily he didn't act out harshly in his anger, but I mean, those thoughts ran through his mind. He just wanted to strangle, Tom for just doing this to their family and accusing him. Ken was also aware of just how dangerous Tom actually was. I mean, this is the bad dude that once got a bad grade back in high school, and he hired some hoodlum or some bad guy to come around and beat that teacher up. I mean, he paid somebody to do that just for getting like a D or something grade. So Ken knew what this guy was, capable of. Well, the thoughts still streamed through Jeannette's mind constantly. I mean, she worried about how would the church handle this that Ken pastored at. I mean, what would they think when they heard this? And also, would she lose Micah because of this? And in addition to Micah, Ken and Jeannette had just had a new baby girl named Jessica. If the authorities believed Tom and these crazy accusations, would they take baby Jessica away from them? I mean, she was terrified. So, Jeannette did the only thing she could. She phoned her lawyer ASAP. And her lawyer, quote, told her, "I don't know what's going on here, but pray hard and get to California." So before, getting on a plane to head that way, Ken and Jeannette fell to their knees and they prayed. And they prayed hard. And then the next morning when they arose, they made several phone calls to friends and family and the church congregation. And they got a prayer chain going and, to pray about this, that somehow, this would be rectified and things would be okay. In addition, before going to California, Ken called up Tom on the phone. And, he knew that he would have to reserve his anger, control yourself, don't fly off the handle. But, he told Tom straight up, look, what you're doing is wrong. And then he proceeded to read a few passages out of the Bible at Tom, to Tom, to let him know that what you're doing is very, very wrong. And listen to this, when he read about 2 or 3 scripture. Well, Tom didn't care. So before boarding that plane, Jeannette and Ken, they prayed one last time and they asked God, please send us a miracle. Help us get out of this mess. And they did, pray hard because, shortly before that, their lawyer had called them as well as Tom's. And their lawyer said, look, guys, this evidence, it's stacked up against you too hard. I don't know what to tell you. So they knew and they were terrified of what was going to happen. Would they lose their children, et cetera, et cetera. So that one last prayer to just please God, miracle. Well, their plane landed in California, and as soon as they got there, they took a cab and they went to Jeannette's mom's house because she also lived in California. And as soon as she got there, she said, guys, you just missed a phone call from the lawyer, their lawyer, Jeannette and Ken's, and he said that there was new evidence against Tom. Apparently, what was a civil case is now a criminal one. And their lawyer wanted them, and of course the mom or Jeannette's mom, to stay quiet about this. Don't speak a word of it right now. Just zip the lips, be quiet. Because apparently Tom did not know that new evidence had been found. And so if he were to get wind of this, he might up and leave, the country and take Micah with him. And then what? They might not ever see poor Micah again. So, they kept it to themselves as instructed. The next day, everyone, including Tom, they were all in the courthouse. And the judge, he brings all of the new evidence forward. Well, as this is happening, Tom's at first confused, and then he's surprised, and he's thinking, what's going on here? Well, from the back double doors, a woman begins to walk in. She walks up the aisle, straight to the judge, and she hands off a tape. As she's handing that tape, Tom's face went from surprised to full-blown panic. He even rose to his feet really quickly, and he said, quote, "Your Honor, I resign. I don't want to press charges. I don't." And then he was cut off by the judge. The judge told him to be quiet and sit down. The judge then proceeded to put the tape in, press play, and a woman's voice could be heard. And here's a quote from the video that was played. And this is the woman starting out talking. "That's how you made those bruises. Was with grease pencils?" And then you could hear Tom's voice saying, "Yes, we used grease pencils." So the tape went on, and apparently Tom had also used some sort of putty to put in the creases, kind of where the skin was broken or looked broken on Micah, that was evidenced, in those pictures that he took and sent to his lawyer. So not only that, apparently Tom also hired a makeup artist to make those cuts and bruises look even more realistic. And that was also evidenced from the tape. Tom, obviously, he tried to protest before everything had played and come out, but to no avail. The judge kept telling him to be quiet, sit down, don't say anything else. The judge, at one point, he finally just pressed pause on the tape, and he looked over at Tom, and he arrested him on the spot. Tom, eventually, he went 6 months in prison, and then he had, for 2 years thereafter, he just lost his visitation to even see or talk to Micah. So he definitely was punished, thank goodness. And when Ken and Jeannette finally were able to see Micah for the first time after court, he looked groggy, as if, he might have been drugged. And they soon found out that Tom had a plan. After court, he was planning to get custody of Micah, Ken to be accused of this crime, and he was already had bought the plane tickets, and they were leaving that next morning was the plan. I mean, he had even packed up his truck, all of their belongings, the full 9 yards. And it didn't say what, country he was fleeing to, but the tickets were bought, paid for, all was a go. Both Ken and Jeannette thought on this, and they were like, my goodness, had that woman not come forward, would they have ever seen Micah again? Probably not. We just don't know. And it just happened that woman's name was Avis, and she was the one that walked the tape into the court that day, and she had been a coworker of Tom's. So she knew very well just how dangerous and crazy this Tom guy was. And in fact, Tom, for several days, had been actually bragging to coworkers about what he was going to do, take revenge on his ex-wife, and he was going to get custody of his son, and yada, yada, yada. So she overheard all these things for days, and she knew, I can't keep quiet about this, so she took it to authorities. And even though she was scared to death because she knew how Tom was, I mean, she drove over 5 hours that day to the courthouse to present that evidence and, give her testimony. So thank goodness for that. And even Jeannette and Ken's, their lawyer, he told him after the fact, he said, listen, guys, that was definitely divine intervention. That's not something, I see in everyday cases like these. And Ken, Pastor Ken, Jeanette's husband, said, quote, life is full of all kinds of injustices and unfair deals. But if people will just stop and invite the God of the universe into their lives, justice will be served. 2 miracles, I'm trying to think of how many, but my goodness, think about this, guys. They prayed before they got on the plane, had their whole congregation praying, and while they were in the air, a miracle came through, because that's when the lawyer had called Jeanette's mom with the new evidence against Tom, which happened to be Avis, the woman that had the tape. So that's a pretty fast miracle that they asked for. Answered prayer indeed. But also just little ones in there. Thank goodness that Tom didn't get out of the country with Micah. So that was thwarted due to the evidence, thank goodness. But yeah, Interesting story, right? I just think it's important too. A lot of times in life, we can get so angry, whether something's done to us or people we love, or even when we're just, we see something online or TV and somebody's had something terrible happen to them. You get angry, right? You want justice. You want revenge sometimes. You just feel that so strongly. But I think it's just so important to stop, slow down, kind of like Pastor Ken did. He didn't fly off the handle at Tom on the phone. He calmed himself. He prayed about it. I think that's so important because if we were to act out on that rage and anger, that's when things get out of hand. That's when things turn sinful a lot of times, when we act out like that. I know I'm guilty of it in the past. I'm not a perfect person, but I try to remind myself that slow down, Kristen. Let's think about this. And if you're not able to do that, pray about it. Pray about it anyway, but you know what I mean? I don't know. There's just something on my mind when I read this story, and I think it's just important, What did you guys think about this one and this miracle? Did you enjoy this story? And other than that, guys, I just want to thank everybody for watching as I try to grow my channel, and I just try to share the good news and share the positivity of life and the miracles that happen all the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and just remember to please like and subscribe if you did, and share it out if you enjoyed it. Other than that, I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you again.